Okay. So actually, I should clarify the slide title is kind of different from the talk title because when I was working on it, I realized that machine learning is not the only part that I wanted to talk about. So some context. So my name's Nikhil. I work at Autodesk. I did my master's at UC Berkeley in human-computer interaction, and I was working as a software engineer before that. So I joined Autodesk to work on a virtual assistant for customer support, which is called the Autodesk Virtual Assistant. And I started on that in 2017 around this time. So over the past 2 years, I've seen the ways we've improved, and I wanted to talk about those. Also, I can't believe I'm the only one in San Francisco wearing a hoodie right now, and a pink one at that. So what is Autodesk? I don't know how many people are familiar with Autodesk, but Autodesk does a lot of makes a lot of software for construction, architecture, engineering, media, and entertainment. So Tesla, Apple, I think use Autodesk products. If you've seen the Salesforce Tower, that was probably made using Autodesk. I'm not entirely sure what's going on at the top of the tower though, so if someone knows, please let me know. I call this the credibility slide. So there's a bunch of numbers about customer support at Autodesk in the past couple of years. And as you can see, it's an increasingly busy street. The number of cases and the number of people needing help and support keeps on increasing. And this street is full of like angry drivers. And our virtual assistant is essentially a gate built on that street. So you can imagine how crazy it can get, especially if like current natural language processing techniques or machine learning algorithms aren't up to the mark. You can imagine that there's a lot of potential for things going wrong. So that's some of the topics I want to cover going ahead. But the thing I wanted to point out really is if you want to do this right, you have to be okay with failing. And failing and learning from that failure. Okay, so in terms of like the interface or the product itself, this is what the evolution looks like. So we started off with a featureless bot as a pilot, and then moved into a more anthropomorphic avatar. And I know that's a big area of discussion, so feel free to reach out to me later about that. But the way we've evolved over the past couple of years is we started off providing more transactional experiences, which essentially automated backend web services. And they provided easy wins for those customers so that they could come to us and talk about the more conversational aspects wherein we can't actually help them right now. So this was a great way of collecting data and improving on that front. Okay. So as you can see, this is like the feel-good slide. There's a bunch of data that tells you how AVA is good. I don't know how many of you were here earlier for Kathy Pearl's talk, because she highlighted a bunch of bad stuff. And I mean, we have a lot of that too, but obviously I didn't put it up on the slide. My favorite one has actually been, there was this angry customer who's asking about, I think, trying to activate their software or something. And we had this like conversational humor intent, I think, that was going haywire for a while. So the bot ended up asking them, I think, what's your favorite fake pasta? Something like that. And the answer's impasta, I guess. I mean, it's a bad pun, let's be honest. But if you put that in front of an already angry customer, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of vitriol. So that was something we really wanted to improve on. In terms of the architecture, this is, I mean, after all, a technical conference. So this is another credibility slide. You have the essential architecture that's composed of like the AWS services, etc. But the thing I really wanted to highlight is the section at the bottom, which is made up of these integrations with Autodesk web services. So as a company, I think we had to change a lot of the backend processes and make them more accessible to consumers within the company itself as in the form of APIs. So that's something I think we had to work on over the past couple of years, breaking down those silos and becoming better at sharing data with each other. In terms of the continuous improvement, the first thing, the very obvious thing, is the interface itself. So this was classic AVA, which, as you can see, there's a big form there that's asking you for data. And this was like the best representation of what we began with. We had extremely transactional flows wherein you could come in, you could give us specific information, and we could come back to you within seconds with some form of a code, or basically a backend web service was doing most of the heavy lifting. So from there, we moved to classic 2.0, which is not very different. But the main difference here is, after collecting data, we learned what were the most popular things that our users cared about. And the welcome message is actually composed of those things. So instead of coming in and having to type them out, you can just click on them now, and you can get to those services much quicker. This is not just a clipped screenshot. The forms on the side have now gone away as well. The problem solving moved more upstream. People realized that creating the transaction widgets is a big win, and they brought them up to the users in different places. So we then integrated them into our conversational flow. So instead of having a form on the side, they were now experiences within the chat interface itself. So the third iteration of AVA, and that's something that we are working on now, is a modularized version. So what does modularization mean in this case? So the reasons, I mean, they're listed out right there, but one of the biggest reasons for us to do this was to provide a more personalized experience for our customers. So if you come to the Autodesk.com website and you're trying to buy a product, you don't want to see the same options as you would when you were trying to seek customer support. So that's one of the biggest reasons we wanted to modularize. For our integration partners, that is people inside of Autodesk, we want them to be able to integrate this by simply copy pasting a single line of JavaScript code. And as an engineer, I wanted the code to be maintainable, scalable, etc. So what does modularization actually look like? So this is the modular version of AVA that was live for Autodesk University. So Autodesk University is kind of the big Autodesk customer-facing conference where everyone who uses Autodesk products is present, and they had a chance to try this out. So this is a very limited domain version, but as you can see, it's similar to like a modal pop-up, I guess like a widget that in the intercom style. And it has very different options from what you would see in the regular customer support AVA. And this provided a good test bed for us to actually try out new things, build out a new architecture, and get some buy-in on that. So what else are we doing? So I don't know if you can see clearly in the screenshot, but there's no input bar anymore. So with the limited domain and narrowing down of the experience, we want to provide more, I guess, limited options to users in terms of what they can do based on what page they are on. We also want to provide some rich UI components. So we've been building out things like accordions or web links and icons, etc., that you can all, like, integrate directly into the flow and have them easily displayed to your users. One important thing I've learned over the past year or so is it's extremely important to collect data. And I'm not just talking about quantitative data. So anyone here who's a designer knows the importance of qualitative research. So how do you do that if you are using a chatbot? I think with conventional interfaces, it is fairly easy to elicit participants. But one of the things that we've tried to do here is to get feedback not just about recognition, but the quality of our solution. So in here, there's a very small link at the bottom which says not what you were expecting. And if you end up clicking on it, we ask them for more information so we can better understand what exactly is not working here. So the second part of the continuous improvement itself is learning. So after collecting this data, how do we actually learn what our users want? One of the fundamental issues that we dealt with is routing itself. So when a user comes in and talks to customer support, you need to send them to the right agent. So for us as customers, those things are pretty invisible. But as someone who worked on developing AVA, it was a nightmare initially, because you needed to manage different kinds of button IDs that go into the Salesforce backend API and map them to specific user intents and try and do all of those things live. So our goal with this actually was, as support cases increase, how do we actually use machine learning to make this easier and better by making it fast and more reliable? And how do we actually go on, collect that data and identify high value automation? So one of my teammates, Ghassan, is actually here, and his data science team worked on like this API, which we call the skills model API. And the way it's integrated in AVA is, if you come in and try to escalate, we ask you what your actual issue is, and after collecting that input, we provide specific options for escalation. Now these options are actually just a reflection of a menu on a web page, but the way they are handled now is we provide our best guess and highlight it to the user instead of forcing a specific choice onto them. So this gives us an opportunity to collect actual user utterances and see what they end up selecting. And that data in itself can then be used to improve how we present these choices to users. What exactly do they mean when they say, I can't work with AutoCAD, or AutoCAD is broken? I think it might be hard to believe, but that's something people say a lot of times instead of actually being extremely specific about their issue. Actually, that's not hard to believe. In terms of what we learned, I think the biggest challenge that we had was building the right training data, or the corpus, and getting good representations of what users mean when they say certain things and how that differs from our own terminology. So Autodesk has different terms for like serial number, product key, activation code, etc. And sometimes people will come in and they'll say, I want the serial key, or I want the product number. So what exactly do they want in this case? The answer isn't some machine learning model, but a lot of times it's learning what flow are they coming from, understanding the context they're coming from, and building out the right workflow, and providing them a fallback option in this case. So one of the things that we want to do is look at machine learning itself to improve our data quality. I think I touched upon this before, but one of the things that we want to do going forward is identify problems that exist upstream and then solve them, and build relationships using data. I had a call, I think, last week with a user researcher who was extremely interested about the conversational data that we were collecting, and it was pretty incredible to hear how they were planning to use it or what they were interested about. So one of the things that we want to do is actually build a way to create interceptions, or a way to elicit people for user research through AVA itself. So those kinds of relationships wouldn't have been possible a year ago. The third thing, and my favorite thing actually, is interaction design can actually help you build those feedback loops to collect the data and then improve machine learning algorithms. I think, as everyone here at this conference knows by now, that machine learning is not a silver bullet, and you need to do a lot of pre-work to actually get to the point where the algorithm helps you out. So interaction design, I think, does a lot of that heavy lifting if you do it well. So I think I mentioned earlier, I started off as a software engineer, and the development cycle was pretty straightforward. It's actually, you can represent it as a line, but the new development cycle that I've seen is more of a continuous improvement one, which is why it's a circle, and a lot of times it's not as linear as this one is. You have a lot of going back and forth on labeling and collecting data, actually deploying the model, keeping it up to date. One of the challenges that we've seen is actually model drift. As people talk about newer issues and newer problems, the existing model might not remain as accurate as it was before, so you need to be collecting the right kind of data and improving. So finally, I'd like to talk about the understanding your users part. So this is where analytics comes in. So in our case, we actually didn't look at any of the existing conversational analytics products, but what we wanted to try and do was model our own analytics around web analytics. So the things we wanted to do was understand our users, recognize patterns, and detect problems. And In the conversation design that we have itself, we've already tried out A/B testing, which is as simple as setting a Boolean variable for a welcome greeting. Then we've done dialog flow analysis on specific error streams to identify what articles don't work anymore, what kind of articles need to be created, or what articles in our knowledge repository don't actually solve those problems anymore. And finally, feedback solicitation itself is a big part of the analysis work. So the main problem that we had was actually that dialog design wasn't always data informed. So a part of it was intuition. It was, oh, I saw it this way, or I heard from someone that it worked this way, etc. So to move away from that, we tried to build a visualization tool, which, as you can see, was extremely messy. The whole thing doesn't even fit into this. But the idea was to try and visualize the dialog tree itself. But like I said, it's not readable. It doesn't even fit on a single screen, so it's not usable at all. So the way we wanted to improve this was to try and emulate user behavior on two fronts. Try and model traffic, see which flows they are going through, and conversion. What specific interactions and actions are they taking? So we ended up actually building our own tool called Ansible, which is actually for annotating conversation. So in our dialog tree, you can actually annotate specific to values, specific nodes in the tree itself for these skill types. So disambiguation, is this node helping users disambiguate? Is it asking them for feedback? Is it providing them guidance as to what to do next? Or is it actually fulfilling their request? And conversions themselves would track when users would complete transactions, when they would actually download products, and so on. So in terms of the whole, 2-year journey, I think one of the biggest things that I've realized, and our team has collectively realized, that there's a lot of potential with the untapped data that exists across the enterprise. So we want to improve the end-to-end understanding, working with service design to create a digital understanding of the customer journey that they've built out. We want to get better at predicting and recommending. So not only does this involve recommending to our users, but also to our agents. And we also want to detect problems much quicker than we've been doing so far. Okay, that's it. Thank you.